Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and so they finally officially released Firefly's limited Lightcone's official stats. Let's talk about it, whether it's really necessary. I want to answer 3 questions. Is it necessary for Firefly? Is there any other alternatives to her? How versatile it is, and also, maybe if you don't have the resources, what other 4-star alternatives, cheaper alternatives can you look towards in order to build your Firefly as well? So first things first, great design here again. With decent amount of HP stats, Destruction Lightcones tend to have a bit more HP stats than other DPS Lightcones, with a 476 attack and 529 defense. Unusual to have a Destruction Lightcone with higher defensive stats than attack percentage or attack. I found that pretty interesting. So let's zoom in a little bit. Metamorphosis, this increases the break effect by 60% at Super in position 1. Very, very strong. It's already better than the one of the 4-star Lightcones at S5. When the wearer deals break damage to an enemy target, inflicts this routed to an enemy. I think this is a debuff. It feels like a debuff, which means you can maybe play into like doctor ratio teams and whatever not if you wanted to. Lasting for 2 turns. Targets afflicted with routed. I think this is a debuff. We have to exactly test it, but my assumption is a debuff, unless of course it works like Hanya's pseudo debuff, which doesn't actually count towards a debuff stack, which is crazy. Receive 24% increased break damage from wearer. I think that this likely will apply to both break damage as well as super break damage, but we will see in a bit or two. And speed is lowered by 20%, which is nice. You slow the enemy, increase more break damage from the wearer, so it's not your team does more damage. So it's a bit selfish of a Lightcone, but it's very good for a very strong DPS. Effects of the similar type cannot be stacked. Now, let's go into the game engine, and before I share with you my thoughts on this one, let's just switch screens real quick. Out of all of them, I was looking at all of the different Lightcones. The only one that comes close in terms of giving you that break effect stat would probably be Indelible Promise. I'm not too sure whether this was an event Lightcone or whether it's a limited Lightcone. I think it's a limited Lightcone, one of the banners they pull. If you have this at S5, you actually get quite close to the break effect. 56%, but of course, unless this was an event Lightcone, you probably won't get very close. HP stats much less, defense stats much less, but attack is about the same as the signature Lightcone. And at the same time, when you use your ultimate, you increase your crit rate by 30%. You don't get that buff, but I think if you have this at super high, super in position, you could consider using this one for Firefly as well if you are looking for that massive break effect substats. Do I think that the signature Lightcone is good? I do think so. I think it's going to be very beneficial, especially for people who are maybe looking to maximize Firefly's damage, since a lot of her damage actually comes from break effect and its derivatives as well, rather than like purely being a crit rate, crit damage DPS. I think that's why it's going to be really, really strong. So some options. Let's go into like the second part. First one is definitely going to be very strong. There are, unlike a lot of the other DPSs in the game, for example, like Jingyuan when he first came out, not much alternatives to Before Dawn way back then, and also like other DPSs who came out, for example, like you have Boot Heal here. If you don't have Sailing Towards a Second Life, not many Hun Lightcones have break effect, but thankfully of course, Destruction does have quite a few options that plays into Destruction kits in general. I like the Indelible Promise, and let's talk about like some alternatives if you don't have the resources and you are thinking of whether you want to pull based on the Lightcones that you have in your roster. S5, Indelible Promise, I think is very attractive. Other than that, Flames Afar, free-to-play Lightcone. This one is likely going to be good for sustaining your character as well. If you are maybe not running with a 5-star sustain character that can solo sustain. Whenever you consume your HP of 25%, and she does consume her own HP quite a lot, you immediately heal 15%, so you get like some refund based off max HP. That's really good. At the same time, they also increase the damage they deal by 50% for 2 turns. So there is a lot of free play options for Firefly already. This one just has like half the amount of defense as a signature. HP is slightly less, like 10% less. Attack is exactly the same, but you gain a lot more sustain. So you sacrifice damage for benefit of sustain, a bit more utility, if especially you want to run into more comps with not a 5-star sustain. Free-to-play players who are looking for Lightcones can tend to this, then at least you won't have much strain on your account, forcing your 5-star limited sustain to be on the same team as Firefly and stuff like that. So I think this is overall good, which you can get it at S5 also, so that's a nice thing to note. So free-to-play players, Flames Afar, very strong. Indelible Promise, probably a good choice if you have it. Unfortunately, it's a new Lightcone, so unless you wheeled out, or unless it's an event Lightcone, I'm not exactly sure at this point. Let me know in the comments below if any of you guys remember. I remember one of these like Misha looking Lightcones were event Lightcone. I just can't remember which one at this point of time. 3-star Lightcones, I don't really like. The stats that you lose from the main stats, regardless of what they do, is not worth it for a DPS, and they don't have too attractive ones as well. Battle Pass Lightcones, this one I don't really like too much. You have to defeat an enemy and attack percentage is like The main benefit of Nowhere to Run is the higher attack percentage. You have here like 10% more attack than the others, but break effect is probably more important for this character. Again, it has to be having Burn and Bleed, move walk time, the other free-to-play Lightcone, not that fantastic. Under the Blue Sky, don't really like this that much as well. If you are using this, you might as well really use Flames Afar, which gives you a lot of utility as well. The next Lightcone that people might be considering will be on the Fall of an Aeon. Whenever the wearer attacks, their attack is increased by 8% this battle. This effect stacks up to 4 times. When you inflict a weakness break on an enemy, the wearer's damage increases by 24%. I think on the Fall of Aeon is a good in-between if you're looking for damage and you don't have the resources. So this is great because she will tend to weakness break enemies quite easily, given that she has colorless breaking in her enhanced mode, which means that she can attack enemies without fire weaknesses and still chunk down the weakness bar, and you get a lot of attack which she scales off with as well, and you can increase damage by 24%. The downside of on the Fall of Aeon is that you don't get the sustain of Flames of Afar. As a free-to-play player, you'll probably be choosing between these two. This allows you to actually get quite a massive amount of HP refund. Let's say she minuses 40%, you get 15% back. In the end, you are only net down by 25%. And at the same time, you increase your damage by 50% for 2 turns. Unfortunately, it's only triggered once every 3 turns, so there's like some downtime, but it's depending on your roster. If you have a 5-star sustain character already, I would tend towards more on the Fall of Aeon if you can delegate the resources. But some of us, maybe newer players, we are pulling other characters in mind. We don't want to like get a full share and we don't have Aventurine, Luo Cha or Ho Ho. Then in that case, I would suggest you go for Flames Afar for a bit more sustain. If you are good, go for on the Fall of Aeon. I won't talk about the limited Lightcones because you likely will be playing them with their respective characters. You probably won't be pulling on the banner otherwise. The last one I want to talk about is something irreplaceable before let's get into how versatile the Lightcone is for like a Firefly signature Lightcone. So this one increases wearer's attack by 24%. Nice to have. The stats are quite high. Good amounts of attack, good amounts of HP. Defense is slightly lower. But overall, you get 24% attack. When the wearer defeats an enemy or is hit, destruction characters generally have quite high aggro draw, so won't be surprised if Firefly gets hit a little bit more than other characters. Immediately restores HP equal to 8% of the wearer's attack, which is nice since Firefly does build for attack somewhat also. At the same time, the wearer's damage is increased by 24% for the rest of turn. So this is a middle ground between both on the Fall of an Aeon as well as Flames Afar. Out of all of them, I think something irreplaceable is probably the most attractive, especially if you're playing with a character like Lynx to draw the aggro to Firefly if you can survive the one shot. If you do not want any aggro draw at all, you want to just focus on sustain, go for Flames Afar. If you have the sustain already ready, you just want damage, go on the Fall of Aeon. I think that will be my recommendations for free-to-play players. Indelible Promise, if you have S5 of this, probably top pick as an alternative. Last but not least, is the Lightcone good for any other character in the game? My honest thought is, I don't really think so. Let me just show you real quick. If we go all the destruction characters, the only ones that actually bother about break effect probably is going to be Xue. None of the other characters scale with break effect very well. They don't do additional damage with break effect, and they probably wouldn't be playing with a Harmony MC team. So it's only Xue, it's only Firefly, and that's about it. The rest of them, you might as well just get a crit rate, crit damage Lightcone, and it's way better. So that is my thoughts on Firefly Lightcone. Are you planning to get it? Because if it's your favorite character and you want to increase damage, getting signature Lightcones for the characters do make quite a big difference when you have them versus when you do not have them. Last but not least, of course, I think I didn't really touch on Secret Vow. Let me just add it in because I just saw it as well. I don't really like this one as much. I'm not too sure whether this additional damage bonus is applied to break and super break damage. I don't think super break damage is going to be modified by this, which is likely going to be where a lot of the damage is coming from. That's why I think that focusing on break is much better than damage percentage in that sense. But then again, more testing needs to be done. I leave this towards the end because testing still could also be done to determine whether this 80% goes on super break damage specific to Firefly, not the Harmony MC's super break damage. But yeah guys, I will be putting a video out on that. If you're interested in that, like, subscribe for more such future content. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and see you in the next video.